All right, Fry, do you want to do the intros and start us off?
No, but I will.
Okay.
I'm not as well versed on this stuff.
All right. Can you guys see it on
So
the screen right now, by the way?
yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
yeah. Looking at Jeremy's profile page.
All right.
So yeah, you can go ahead and start the intro if you'd like, Matt.
Okay.
I'm not nearly as versed on that as you are. You always make it sound much better. I
Well,
just fangirl.
I'd like to welcome everybody today. Today we got a good friend Jeremy here. Jeremy, your crypto comics creator, is you have your own line of comics that you sell on Comixology and Crypto Comics and all sorts of stuff. So uh, why don't you, I guess, go introduce yourself?
Well, hi, my name is Jeremy Burley. I'm a comic book artist, writer, self-publisher. My current project I'm working on is called Morningstar, and it's Lucifer's Fall from Heaven told as a Western. So, I love the comic book creating process. It's a story that I just think is endlessly fascinating and interesting. And I try to write and draw the kind of things that I would want to read as a comic fan. And this is one that I hadn't seen this kind of take on a Western, and I hadn't seen this take on Lucifer before. So I thought, hey, no one else is making it. Let's get out there. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting too. You do everything for the book, correct?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's not just the writing and drawing. I letter the book. I ink it. I do the gray tones in Photoshop. I pretty much do everything but roll it off the printing press.
That
Okay.
is cool.
You kind of have a like a to me it just has a Frank Miller kind of feel to it. I love the art. I love it and the storyline. So
Thank you. I mean, that's high praise. I'll take that any day. Miller's definitely one of my big influences, and I think that we live in an era where there's been a lot of great comic book collaborations, and it's not that I would never collaborate with anybody, but it's more that my favorite books have tended to be one, sort of like Walt Simonson working on Thor, or Frank Miller's Sin City, or Howard Chaykin doing American Flag. The works that I think have struck me the most and influenced me the most are ones where it's not even about artist versus writer. It's about a creator making one solid, rich book that you know. I mean, just as easily you could look at something like another book that I really enjoy that's got a great creative team is Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' Criminal. That's two people who you can't really tell where the artist ends and the writer begins. But for me, in terms of doing all of it, doing the whole process, for instance, lettering. Lettering is something that a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy doing, and this is something that they may want to farm out or have a freelancer help them with, or that kind of thing. But for me, the writing, the lettering, I look at that as a rewrite pass after I've worked on my outline of my script. And also, I letter my pages before I draw them. I do a bunch of thumbnail sketches to work out all the actions that the characters are doing. Like, for a lot of people, thumbnailing is just stick figures. That's kind of what my thumbnails are. I may get more detailed if I really need to flesh out a sequence, or if there's certain details I want to make sure that I capture in the final one. But once I have my stick figures showing how many panels are on a page and what the page layout is, I then I create like a lettering template. I create like a blank template that it's the proportions of a comic book page, and I'll draw out on the computer all of my panel borders, and I'll place my lettering there. And then what I do is I do my actual pencils. I'll print out that template. Although now I'm starting to move into doing it on the iPad, but I would print out that template on paper, and I would draw my layouts into that template. That way I don't run into that problem of having a character speaking first on the wrong side of the panel. It actually helps work out a lot of visual storytelling problems. And I may have visualized something in my thumbnails one way, but once I see how it flows on the written page, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I need to recompose this panel. And because I'm both writing and drawing, it's not like the writer side, the writer Jeremy says, oh, it has to be this way, so I have to change the art to do it. I have the freedom to change the artwork to fit the writing better, or the freedom to change the writing to fit the artwork better. So for me, it's a very holistic creative process. it's all much more like being like a cartoonist, like Bill Watterson. You know, I mean, no one's going to say Bill Watterson is not a great visual storyteller. He could have done graphic novels. He could have done whatever any type of comics he wanted to do. I mean, he's a great watercolor artist and great painter.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the way that I make comics as a very, very poor man's Bill Watterson in the sense of the process. Like, it's all one thing to me.
So you mentioned using your iPad. What's your favorite app to use as far as building this out? Are you just using Procreate and drawing each of the pages individually, or?
Yes, Procreate has been my favorite, and I've been doing. I basically a couple of pieces. I did some standalone non-comic pages. I did them as a test to really learn how to use Procreate, because I've had it for a very long time, but it wasn't until I got an iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil that I could really take full advantage of it.
Yeah, it really makes a difference, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I had like an older iPad, and it had a stylus that wasn't an Apple Pencil. I had it before the Apple Pencil came out, and Procreate was around even back then, and I tried using it, and it was fun to sketch on, but the level of control just wasn't there yet compared to what I have when I'm drawing on a Cintiq, which I still use that when I'm drawing on my desktop. But having the ability with the Apple Pencil, the level of control really made me say, okay, I can make comics on the iPad. And right now, I'm still inking traditionally, but my new thing, and I'm testing this out for the final issue of Morningstar, which is I'm going to do all of my my pencils, my layouts on the iPad, drawing into that template that I told you about for the whole issue. I've already got those laid out. And then I'll take those, convert them to blue line, and I'll print them out on Bristol board, large size, and I'll ink it traditionally. But that's more because I've drawn all of the other issues, I've inked them traditionally, and I don't necessarily want to switch to digital on the last issue just because I want that consistency of having a full set of original inks.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's really tempting to just draw the whole thing digitally.
Just switch it over.
With the it looks real buttery, and I think for the next comic that I make, I really have to think long and hard about whether I want to go full digital for that. On one hand, I like having original art, even though I haven't been selling the originals from Morningstar so far, but I do like creating those. On the other hand, the convenience of having it all there digitally, and like even just with the first page I was working on yesterday, I just look at a character, I'm like, it should be a little bit smaller. Just lasso him, shrink him down, adjust the position.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your background as far as the art goes?
You mean background in terms of my art education?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was fortunate enough to go to a high school that had AP studio art. So the same way people have AP history or math or chemistry, the school I went to had AP studio arts. The idea was that you would get college credits for it. And the purpose of the class was that it was a 2-year class. You took it your junior and senior year to get, basically you got credits, but the point was you spent 2 years building your portfolio for when you applied to college. So I applied to UCLA's fine art program and I got in. And so I went there, and I had mixed feelings about it, though I've really come to appreciate it a lot more now that I'm done, because the real positives is that the program taught you how to think about art, how to develop ideas. They very much inspired creativity, and however outlandish your idea was, they taught you how to explore those ideas, learn how to properly which is, I'm not necessarily doing a great job of expressing it, but they taught you how to describe your ideas, how to deal with conceptual art, and just, it was, I'm doing a horrible job of butchering it right now. But the point being is that the program was geared towards the contemporary gallery scene, meaning a lot of art installations, video installations. They had drawing, painting, and sculpture, but none of it was necessarily geared towards illustration. There was no illustration program.
Okay.
So to be honest, while people were making interesting work and creative work, I don't think they necessarily cared if you could draw your way out of a paper bag. Draftsmanship and academic drawing skills were not particularly emphasized and were not necessarily important. And they honestly felt like you didn't necessarily have to draw well to make interesting art. And I think that that is something for the general public outside of comics. I think that that's true for people that are interested in art and have creative things they want to express. There's lots of ways to express creativity that don't involve drawing or don't involve technical drawing, technical draftsmanship. But what happened was, for all of its ability to teach me how to be creative and explore ideas, I think I came out of the program a worse draftsman. And towards the end of college, I started taking classes in the animation program. And that's when the light bulb went off. I'm all, oh, animators need to understand how to draw things in 3 dimensions, how to be able to look at something from one angle and picture what it looks like from any other angle, to be able to revolve it like a 3D model inside of their head. And once I started that, I was like, oh, wait, animation is the direction I want to go. And I wish I'd been an animation major all the way through. You can't get an undergraduate degree in animation at UCLA, at least at the time I was there. But I would have used up all of my electives the entire time just studying animation if I could have. So my main art education was at a fine art program, but it was more on the fine art conceptual gallery side, and that wasn't really where I was interested in going. So I think after that, I went into graphic design, worked for many years in different graphic design jobs, but I always was interested. I realized after a certain number of years that I loved comics and really just wanted to make comics. And as I started getting back into it, I was working in the toy industry, and a coworker of mine took me with him to a figure drawing class. And I had never really enjoyed figure drawing in the past because I wasn't good at it. There tends to be 2 types of paths for an artist in terms of the way they interpret drawing. There are people who can look at something and they can replicate it perfectly. They're like a human camera. It's scary, you know. They're like their ability to do realism, and even if like someone like Alex Ross. Alex Ross is drawing extremely fantastical imaginary works, but it's very deeply rooted in the traditional illustrative school of getting photo reference, dressing up models, photographing the models, having all that reference, and being able to make things that look photorealistic. Then there's people who are kind of like Sean Galloway, Cheeks. I don't know if you know his work, or you know, Mike Mignola. Everybody knows Mike Mignola. Mignola is not drawing photorealistic illustrations.
No,
Right.
Yeah, it's a very unique style.
Yeah, so that most of the time artists, I tended to fall into the Mignola camp. It's just in terms of I drew out of what the things that look best were the things I drew out of my imagination. But then I realized that the more I was always going to be bad at it if I never studied it and worked at it. So I started taking figure drawing classes, and I feel like that was when it's probably been well over 10 years now that I've been taking figure drawing classes regularly on a weekly basis. And that to me felt like the true beginning of my art education. Up until then, everything else had been sort of like me playing with art and having fun with it. But once I simply dedicated myself to, I want to be a better draftsman, that really felt like the start of a journey that I am still very much on and have a long way to go. But I've seen my artwork improve dramatically doing that. So that is the very, very long, epic answer to the very simple question, what is my art background?
It sounds like you've navigated all over the place, really. I mean, but that makes a lot of sense when you go through your books, like we were talking about before we started recording here. You know, I don't know, it's pretty clear that you've been able to cultivate from a lot of different influences, you know, and meld them together and make them really work really, really well. I mean, this is one of the more surprising books where when you find out that you really are the artist on everything. I mean, writing aside, you know, this is one of the better books that we've got in the system, period, as far as the art style and the art that's in use. When you add on that you also wrote it, you've also, you know, edited it yourself, as you say, you're lettering, you're doing the inking. I mean, it's just crazy. That's nuts.
So
kind of a one-man band.
Speaking of that, when you first start a new project, do you come at it from more of a artistic side or more of the kind of writer, like I want the plot, I want the characters fleshed out, or do you come at it with a this is the feel I want, this is the genre, um, and kind of go from there? Like, which camp are you really?
Well, again, I'm like Yogi Berra. When I see a fork in the road, I take it. Um,
Okay.
Morningstar literally began. I was, I think, probably either still in college. I was definitely still in college, but I think it might even been when I was in like my last year of high school. But I was at San Diego Comic-Con one year, and I was sketching. I was just hanging out in between doing some portfolio reviews and showing my work around. So I guess I probably had finished high school, and like one or two summers after that, I was going with a buddy of mine to San Diego. And in between showing my work around, I was just hanging out, taking a break, and just sketching in a sketchbook. And I drew this big, cowboy with the just huge, muscly guy with a shotgun and cowboy hat. And for some reason, I don't know why I was looking at it. When I was done, I just drew some wings on. And something about that imagery of like this, very like Clint Eastwood, Charles Bronson looking cowboy Western character with wings. I'm like, there's something here. So when I start a project, it can literally be like I simply have a sketch, like a picture in my mind. And then out of that, I'm like, well, what is the story of this character? And I slowly start writing those things down and fleshing it out. I have also had stories where I simply said something to a friend to make them laugh, like a concept. And then that concept was all, that would be an interesting log line. Like what would be like in film when they say the tagline for a movie, just that one or two sentences that sums up the premise. And sometimes just as a joke, I'll say something ridiculous and I'm like, I wonder what it would be like if I made that. And then from a verbal side, I will start fleshing it out. But either way, once I get to that point of starting to flesh it out and build out, well, what is the core of this story? Sometimes I tend to be more of a plot first versus just having a character and put them in scenarios. But I also have stories where I just come up with a character. But regardless, once I have something that is like maybe a scene that I'd like to hang a story on, and sometimes it's an opening scene, sometimes it's a climax, sometimes it's just a character that's in the middle of a situation where they're completely screwed. Once I have that picture in my head, then I'll be sketching that out and start trying to really feel what the character feels like. And this is something I have not produced enough comics to put into practice yet, but I've had the thought that sometimes it would almost be nice to not do my character designs until I have already thumbnailed out an entire graphic novel. And the reason why I say that is because I have found the thinking behind that, and I haven't tried this before. Everything I've worked on before, I've done lots of character sketches before thumbnailing the work out. But as I've done this, I've found that when I'm really thumbnailing the story, and then even when I'm doing pencils and layouts, it's almost like you do, like in film, if you were to do costume design, you work it out, you design the costumes, you have the fitting for your characters, and then you get them on set. Now, for instance, like, all the Batman movies up until like the second Christian Bale movie, they had that problem where he can't turn his head. He's got to turn his whole body, So you start realizing that you make something, you make it look incredibly cool, and then you're like, oh, this isn't practical. Like, for instance, just designing tattoos on a comic book character. Tattoos look super cool in still images, but when you have to draw that same thing over and over, page after page, panel after panel, you start finding excuses to put that character in a jacket and a parka. You'll put him in a rain store or something just so you don't have to draw those damn tattoos.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing where I have found to a smaller degree, I will find that I may have designed the characters in one way, and then halfway through the story, I'm like, it's not even a matter that the way I'm drawing it is a pain in the ass or difficult to draw. It just doesn't feel right. Or there's something in their costume that could be more practical. And I'm like, oh, I should just change this and make it that. But if I've already gone a pretty far distance in the book, it's kind of too late unless I actually insert a scene just so that I can change their costume, which I'm not above doing because, again, writer artist, I can do whatever the hell I want.
Right. Yeah.
But there's something about working that out beforehand, seeing how a costume is going to practically be used in a story, and then adapting it as you know before you even get to drawing and inking the first real page. So it's something that I've been thinking about. But these are the kind of ideas that you can't really put into practice when you only publish an issue or two a year, or you've only got a handful of graphic novels. This is the kind of thing where you're doing comic books day in, day out, month after month, year after year, and you've built up a body of work. And these are kind of like broader comic book storytelling ideas. These are things that hopefully, as I have more time to produce more work in the future, I can start implementing these things. Because right now, I'm still working on improving my storytelling, both on the page and as a writer, and improving my draftsmanship. There's a certain degree where after you build up enough experience that you don't have to think about how to say what you're saying. And once you can say anything visually that you want, you can draw any environment that you imagine, you can put a character in any scenario, you can put in animals or vehicles. Once you don't have difficulty doing that anymore, then you can really start playing with, all right, what do I want to do with the medium? Do I want to do something that's kind of like, do I want to try and Jim Steranko this and try and bring something that no one's ever seen before? Do I want to start playing with narrative experiments? Those are the kind of things that when you're able to crank out a lot of work, you're no longer, and you're a lot of work and keeping it at a certain level of quality, that's when you can start having some fun playing with the medium itself. And that's something that I look forward to achieving in my career down the line.
I look forward to reading it if you don't think you already are. That's for sure. There's a lot of things that you do that are just so different from other creators, from like the panel layout, like what Matt's showing right now, to, I mean, the action sequences themselves, I think are my favorite part. Want to say it was book 7 at the very beginning of it, where it's got, you know, the daughter and I'm sorry, I shouldn't say the daughter, but I don't want to ruin anything for anybody that hasn't read anything, so I'm just going to refer to her as the daughter. But yeah, the action sequence that starts that book out is so freaking cool. I mean, just the way you go from that, well, yeah, what Matt's showing right now, the way you go from that interior page and it just all of a sudden it's just full out action.
I like how it
And
starts
just the way that
quiet and escalates quickly.
yeah, it's cool, man. I think if you don't think you're already kind of stretching boundaries here, this is going to be real fun to follow along with you. Me.
Well, speaking of, so this page right here, what is it, page 8? I remember you you were doing a YouTube video. It was kind of a tutorial on how to do layouts and kind of progress your book that way. Now, this was actually you were drawing this image, this page during that video. So you know that was one of those like, oh, I remember watching this video when I got to this. So um, for me, one of the crazy things about your layouts is the different kind of angles that you take with each individual panel. Like I've seen some that were like the Dutch angles, where it's kind of, you know, askew and just a really different um, layout for a page. So I love that.
Oh, well, thank you. No, I mean, I really genuinely appreciate that, because I think inside of my head, I always see it like I'm comparing myself to all of the great comics I've read all my life. So when I try something, it's generally I see the places where I didn't quite get it and I fall short. I don't necessarily see the places where I'm like, oh, it looks like you kind of got it. But in you mentioning that, I think that the good thing I guess I'm doing is that if it looks like it's really different and stuff that you haven't seen before in visual storytelling, it means I'm doing a good job of hiding my influences. Because, for instance, one of the things that I looked at really closely, you may not notice this, but I use a lot of 9-panel grids, or it'll be like 7 or 8 panels, but it's like like for instance, even the page that you're showing on the screen right now, like the right hand page, it's a 9. I combines, you know, two it's 2 panels at the bottom, but the rest of it is a 9-panel grid. And I tend to lay out all of my pages that way, where I start with a 9-panel grid, and then I just decide, all right, do I have a shot that needs to take up a full tier, like a widescreen thing, and then I'll just combine those 3 panels, and you get like a top tier. And then, I'll divvy up the rest of the page as necessary. One of the influences for this was somebody I already earlier mentioned, which was Sean Phillips and Ed Brubaker. Their work in Criminal. And the reason why I specifically mentioned them is because in looking at their pages, I can't remember why, but there was something subconsciously that I was trying to reference in terms of the storytelling, and I wanted to look at how they did it because they did it very well. And what I realized is that Sean Phillips is an artist who his pages feel incredibly dynamic to me. And then I realized that he's using a very simple, maybe not necessarily a 9-grid layout, a 9-panel grid layout like Watchmen, but he uses a lot of like 6-panel Jack Kirby like framework. Like the actual way that the page is laid out is very, very simple, but he makes what's happening in the page, and he'll like usually on at least two panels per page, he'll have them breaking the panel borders, not in terms of having a character reaching out and breaking out, but just that it'll be a panel without borders, so it sort of bleeds into the rest of the page. He's dressing up a very, very simple architecture, a very simple framework. And I think that's something that if you look at this now, you look at it and you'll be like, oh yeah, he isn't really, it's like you said, it's like using a Dutch angle at a certain place to like move the eye through. But in terms of the actual architecture of the page, the foundation of the page, it's very, very simple. So the fact that it doesn't necessarily come off that way, I take that as the highest compliment. Because I feel like, I got away with it again.
Yeah, it's really cool the way everything is laid out.
For those of you guys listening in and watching, I highly recommend checking out his YouTube tutorials. They're awesome. I watch them every time they come out. So yeah, and it's cool because you get to watch the book being made as it's and then come over here, buy the book, and there you go.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah, I enjoy having people come there and see what I'm doing and producing. And again, that's the other nice thing about self-publishing is that I don't, I'll tell people if a particular page I'm working on is spoilerish, but if people don't mind and they want to see it, like I can literally show people every step of me making the whole thing. So it's nice,
which is amazing. I mean, and usually creators try to hide that, so that's so cool.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's funny. I'm not sure how many creators want to hide it and how many have to do it contractually. Because again, even if they're working with a small publisher, that publisher may not want them showing artwork from something that's not going to hit the shelves for like 3 months or 6 months, or something that may really tip the hand, that something that was set up in the first issue is actually going to be a cool twist later on. So there's lots of reasons for hiding those things. Whereas again, I can show what I want, but also the way that I tend to write is that I don't think I'm really going for a surprise twist at the end. I like the idea of, I think it was Alfred Hitchcock who's talking about the difference between surprise and suspense. And I'm going more for the suspense. I'm not trying to do a gotcha and show somebody something and they're like, oh my God, I never saw that coming. I like to set up a, like that ticking bomb, like in what was it, Touch of Evil, that Orson Welles movie, where they've got it where somebody puts a bomb under the car at the beginning, and then it's driving away, and the whole time you're watching, like all these other people that are going on, you're just wondering when is the bomb going off, and the tension's just ratcheting up. That's the kind of stuff that I like, is except with people's emotions and scenarios.
Well, you chose very good content to do that with. That's for sure. I mean, as you'd mentioned, it's kind of hard to do a spoiler about a story that just about everybody already knows, but the way that you've built everything out and the engagement, and I mean, just, I don't know, you took something that everyone knows and you turned it into something that's got just a ton of originality into it, which is amazing in itself. It's
Oh
gonna
yeah.
be really cool to see the next books that you come out with where it's all your content. That's for sure.
So I did notice that. Oh, we had talked earlier, and we had mentioned the fact that yes, this is a story of Morningstar, the devil. Everybody knows how it ends. Um, but the one thing that I like about it is all the names. Like I'm actually like, oh, I'm familiar with that, particular character in literature in the Bible or Dante's Inferno, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of recognize where this is going, but I love the fact that where it's a western, I have no idea exactly what your take is going to be on it. So great job.
Yeah, like one of the big changes that I wanted in the story was I just wanted there to be, I didn't want it just to be a bunch of dudes on horses. So I wanted there to be more female characters in it. And one of the things I did was I made, instead of the Archangel Gabriel, I made it a woman. I made her Gabrielle.
Yeah.
And she is one of my favorite characters I've ever created. I love her. If this was ever a movie, I would want Ruth Negga from Preacher to play her, because she plays Tulip on Preacher, if you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Her personality is literally the personality of that character, except with less cursing. But that character. Sometimes characters do take on a life of their own. I almost feel like I don't want to take credit for creating her, because I feel like she was a gift to me. I just started making her. I'm like, oh my god, this person's amazing. I will follow her anywhere. So I'm glad that happened. But yeah, just different things of changing it up. Like for instance, making Raphael this character. He's a character who's like a symbol for doctors, and so in the story he's actually a healer and can heal people, heal their wounds. There was a page that you were showing there, and I even kind of indicated how Gabriel gets this horn, that ends up having the trumpet that's played at the end of at the end times. They actually even show the process of her getting that horn.
Okay.
Well, I hope they make it into a movie. I just want to see a minigun in the back of a covered wagon. Or use one. I mean, I'm completely game for that. I'll stand in line and be an extra.
Thanks. That was one of those that just in the sketching out of the story, I was like, this is just looks cool. And you don't like. I think anytime you see it in a movie, I think actually I was rewatching the Wild Bunch for reference early on, and just seeing like how just that old fashioned Gatling gun, that hand cranked Gatling gun, just mowing people down. I was like, I gotta use this.
I love it. What is it? Book 4, I want to say, where the panel just shows it ripping through the side of it. I mean, from the interior, you know what I mean? That's like the most Quentin Tarantino thing I think I've ever seen in a comic book. I was like, so awesome. I mean, yeah, that was great. And that I was lucky enough. That was actually the last book that you had at your booth when I met you at Amazing in Las Vegas. And so I unfortunately had to sit and wait from that moment until now to be able to continue reading the story, or excuse me, from that moment until this morning. But yeah, that's one of those ones where even my son picked up the book. It was just like, Dad, oh, look at this one. Look at this page. This is so cool. I mean, now he wants a Gatling gun. I'm not sure how I'm going to fend that one off, but
I'll get it one way or the other, by hook or by crook. One day you're just going to come home and be like, what's that? It's like, nothing but.
And when the side of my garage gets ripped through, that's.
Just tell them not in the house. Not in the house.
Oh, that's so cool. So you mentioned earlier, that you're kind of limited as far as, working on the books and doing that stuff. And we've mentioned the YouTube videos and stuff, the tutorial videos that you make. I mean, what's your trick for managing your time and scheduling out your work and everything? with how all that goes?
Well, the trick is that I do it poorly.
Oh,
I basically I only get about 1 to 2 hours a day to make art. I use fortunately in my work, I can work while I eat, like just
mhm.
doing my day job. So usually what I do is I use my entire lunch to just work on whatever comic story I'm doing or whatever piece of artwork I'm doing. I'll just work on that. So 5 days a week, I get to spend an hour a day during the middle of the day. Then in the evening, I'm spending time, spending some family time with my wife, taking care of stuff around the house. And there's always stuff that is non-art related that's related to creating comics that you have to do.
Mhm.
But so if I can get 1 hour a night at home to do it, that's great. What usually ends up happening is that there's one night where I can just spend the whole evening making art, and then the rest of the week I don't get to do anything. So it's like I just have a handful of hours. But what I do is, for instance, the live stream. The live stream means that every day on Sunday, I'm going to sit down for at least an hour and make art. I know that I'm going to have at least 1 hour a day that I'm going to be drawing during the weekday. It's not very much. And I do make artwork outside of those hours. But I think that literally saying that the fact that the only tip I can give is give yourself a very modest, like a doable, like ground floor. So my ground floor is, an hour a day during lunch, and then an hour when I'm doing my live stream on the weekend, and then like whatever else I can fit in. So realistically, a lot of times on paper, I may only have 6 hours a week to make art. But when I have those 6 hours, I'm eager to get to them. I'm not like going to get in there and be like, oh, let me watch a couple of YouTube videos first. No, when it's time, I get in and I go. And secondly, that's very little time, but that's my ground floor. I'm always going to do that no matter what. Even on a horrible week, I do that. On a great week, I'm able to do at least double that. If I'm able to come home and get like an hour in the evening or two, then that means that right there I've kind of doubled it. And then there's some weekends where if I don't have family obligations or we're not meeting up with friends or doing other stuff, then sometimes I can sit down and say, all right, I'm going to be able to draw for like 4 or 5 hours today, like on a weekend. Being able to do that on top of the other time I have, it would be ideal if that were my regular schedule. But
Right.
I know for a fact that life is not always going to be like that. And when making art is not your full-time job, you literally have to decide, all right, am I going to not do anything at all? Or am I going to simply take advantage of whatever time I have and make the best I can use of it? So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's interesting to me how you can fit everything in when you're literally doing everything in the book. I mean, that's incredible. And you're pumping these things out at such a rate that, I mean, a team would have a difficult time coming up with the content this fast. And I know that this, Morningstar isn't something that you started last week, obviously.
Mhm.
But even then, I mean, you're also doing your own conventions, you're doing your own marketing. I mean, that's, like I said, that's an entire team worth of stuff. It's pretty crazy. You're capable of managing all that and kind of keeping your head on straight, really.
Well, I don't know. My head is a little crooked sometimes. But
Yeah.
in terms of like doing conventions as well, I was having a conversation with my wife the other day because this year I only have one convention on the books, and of course, because of the coronavirus, we'll see how many conventions. Whether I'm doing WonderCon is the only show I have on the books this year. Hopefully, it'll still go off a hitch and it'll be a great show. But I don't think I think a lot of people are concerned about what's going to happen this convention season. That said, before any of this ever happened, I only had one show on the books because the time leading up to the show, getting stuff printed, packing my convention gear, resupplying stuff, sometimes like 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the convention can all of my creative time can be eaten up with convention prep. And then usually the week afterwards, there's usually people I have to follow up with different things. There's just the sheer exhaustion, getting over con crud, just needing time. Like I may want to just sit and sketch for a little while and not even be working on a book, just let my brain decompress.
Right.
So for each convention, you could say that 3 weeks of productivity can be eaten up. And if you multiply that by what I used to do, which was about 3 or 4 shows a year, you know, at that point, you're losing like a month and a half's worth of creative time or more, you know. So I've also like I dialed back on conventions this year specifically. So I'm like, let me just finish Morningstar. That's my highest priority for this year. Just sitting down and working on that. But I was also having dinner with a buddy of mine the other day, and a lot of the conversation revolved around trying to find time to make art when making comics is not your full-time job.
Yeah.
Right.
And I realized like they say that in order to draw comics full-time, your speed should be at least be able to draw a page a day. And I told my buddy, well, first off, I obviously don't have time to draw a page a day, but I said, let's say that you're only able to draw 1 panel a day. I think that most artists could probably, like, you can say, all right, I'm going to sit down and do 1 ink drawing a day. Unless you're doing an environment or an establishing shot with all sorts of vanishing points, you can do a panel a day. You can pencil and ink 1 thing. If you can do 1 panel a day, and you do that for 365 days, if your comic pages average 6 panels per page, that's still 60 pages a year. 60 pages a year is, you know, that's like a graphic novella. If you've got a comic that's only 20 pages instead of 24, then that's 3 issues a year. And I think any indie creator would be like, what? 3 issues a year? That's a good, I mean, that's a good clip for an indie creator who has a different day job. 3 issues, that's a good ass clip. So, but again, that's also just the pencil and inking. That doesn't take into account the writing, the gray toning, all of that. So, I mean, there's a lot there. And I've even been thinking about the fact that what I need to do going forward is I used to sit down, work on a project, and then would just write until I had it all written out. And then I would sit down and start drawing it. That's kind of what I did with Morningstar. I think for my next project going forward, once I'm all done with Morningstar, I'm going to start writing. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reserve like 20 minutes a day to just write and get myself into the habit of writing every single day. Because I don't think I've put as much, I know that I haven't put as much time into learning how to write as I have into learning how to draw. And if I want my writing to grow as well, then I need to make it part of my everyday practice, as opposed to having long periods where I'm not writing and then diving deeply into it. It feels, each time I start writing, it feels like I'm starting from scratch. Whereas if I write every day, no matter what, I don't have to worry about relearning how to write again. I can just stay up on it, stay fresh. And then if I get a project completed and finished, and it's like I've done my outline, the plot points are tight, I've written the dialogue as much as I can without actually drawing the characters and seeing if I want to tweak stuff. And I'm like, this thing is polished enough that I can hand it to someone else to draw if I needed to. Then I start writing the next book. That way I never have to think about what I'm going to do next. I've always got, you know, the idea is going forward to always have projects that are ready to launch as soon as I finish drawing the previous project.
That's cool.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of pre-planning there for sure.
Oh yeah.
So that's way cool. You mentioned that you were going to be going to WonderCon?
Yeah. WonderCon in Anaheim. It's April 10th through the 12th.
Are people going to be able to find your booth by Morningstar or under Gerimi or under Optic?
It should be under my name, just Gerimi Burley with a G. But my booth is going to be D24. So in Artist Alley. So if you go into Artist Alley, D24, that's where I'll be.
Cool.
Okay.
And I've been there the past few years. So, you know, it's the same spot I've had. Should be, as long as they haven't moved where that is in Artist Alley, people should be able to find me. I should have the same spot I've had the past few years.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a big event. There's a lot of people going this year, especially with Emerald City canceling like they did and everything like that. It seems like WonderCon's really gonna go big. Hopefully it works out.
Yeah, I'm knocking on wood, because I mean, I
Yeah.
think a lot of indie creators are concerned about how this is going to impact their livelihood. For people
Mhm.
who comic creators or just illustrators or craftsmen, or you know people that make fan art and make different types of crafts and creations, you know people that are doing it full time, they're maybe making, their income is, they got to have like a convention a month, or at least 7 or 8 shows a year. And if you've
Mhm.
got like a couple of major shows closing down, that they're taking a big financial hit. So you
Oh,
know
absolutely.
yeah, I'm lucky that my day job is the thing that I worry about for finances. But my heart definitely goes out to creatives that are going to have to look at other streams of income, because conventions may not, this is going to be a rough year for conventions. So I definitely feel for other creators.
Yeah, it's gonna be a weird year for sure. The nice thing is you've got kind of a collection of the most creative individuals in the world. So I'm a little more excited to see how everybody kind of works around the issues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're already seeing things like, I mean, even Funko Pop as a company is doing just an online convention at this
Mm-hmm.
point. You see a lot of creators that are, when, as I mentioned before, when Emerald City canceled out, they, chose to go to smaller conventions that were, more local, just to fill that time slot. And I think try to make something out of nothing. But that makes it really interesting as well, because this will be one of the first years where you can go to a really small local convention and end up seeing a lot of names that you would never imagine seeing at those conventions, which is kind of cool. It brings back the old solidarity and the mentality of what a Comic Con used to be, um, before it became just kind of a full out celebration of pop culture. Um, so I mean, I think it's got its good and its bad at the same time. Hopefully, creators can just make some money off of it at the same time. We always want to see them, and obviously, be able to afford to eat. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. But no, I mean, to your point, it's an industry filled with some of the most innovative, creative people, artists, writers, editors, colorists, letterers, everybody. It, you get a bunch of people working to solve challenging problems and sharing. I mean, that's the thing with
Hmm.
Twitter and Facebook and all these social media, the ways that creators can communicate with each other and say, hey, I'm going to try this experiment, or hey, maybe we could organize this other event together, either online or in person. You've got all these people working to solve these problems. I definitely hope, like you, that they're going to find some really creative, innovative solutions to these. So.
Yeah, I think no matter what people are going to, I'm more interested to find out exactly what those are going to end up being. I mean, it's always been one of those things where creators will always find a way. Um, just seeing what direction that all goes, I think it's just going to be cool.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Anaheim will be a great big show for you, though. Hopefully.
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean, that's
thanks.
the reason why that's the one show I'm doing. Like, that's been sort of my home base for, I'm in LA, and that's been a show. Well, it's funny because it's been generally my best producing show the entire time I've been self-publishing. I was going to WonderCon back when it was still in San Francisco.
Mm.
So, I mean, and even going up there and having the extra cost, the driving and the hotels and such, it still outperformed most of the other shows I did. So yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite events.
So you're not going to be going back to Amazing Con this year?
Well, I am not going this year, but I'm gonna wait and see how things are either the following year. And it's a good show, and that show has actually done very well for me as well. But I'm skipping it this year. It For the most part, the skipping of any show this year is more about, I want to just spend more time making art, making stories. Because I feel like part of the people have been talking about the possibility of convention fatigue over the past few years. There being so many shows that maybe people's sales were down a little bit, and I noticed that my sales have been down to some degree as well. But I feel like part of that is just not finishing Morningstar or not publishing new work as quickly as possible, because the people that bought my work and enjoyed it would show up, the next year and be like, hey, I really enjoyed this. Is the next issue out? Or have you started another series? People have been asking, like, even now you're flipping through pages of Eye of the Gods on the screen there below. That's my first graphic novel. People have been asking me for a sequel to that graphic novel for ages. So that's another project that I'm looking at doing. But it's the fact that I haven't been producing as much work as quickly as I'd like, which again goes back to what we talked about earlier about time management and even working in small chunks, per week, still consistently producing work. But I realized that by cutting back on conventions, I can bring more new work to the conventions I do go to. So I think the idea is I'm ramping it down to doing fewer shows. If it weren't for the fact that WonderCon is kind of like is in LA, I probably wouldn't do any shows this year. And then looking at it, a lot of my friends like to use the touring analogy for bands. You're in the studio, but when you put out a new album, you're on tour, you're going all over the world, you're hitting all these different cities. So right now I need to finish Morningstar. I need to go back in the studio and start putting together my next album. And then when that's ready, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to do any shows between now and when the next book I do launches, but it means that producing the work has a higher priority than doing the conventions. So again, the nice thing is having a YouTube channel means that people that I've met at shows in the past can still touch base. They can actually see, this is the reason why I'm not at a show. They're like, oh, that's the thing you're making? Oh no, stay home, work on that. I want to see that, finish that. So it's a challenging balance, but I also think about the fact that when I was a kid growing up, our small local conventions, like you said, about it's nice to be able to see creators that weren't necessarily going to those smaller shows. I remember getting somebody who worked on a Marvel or DC book at our local cons. They would usually get one or two guests. They would try to get like a name writer and a name artist at every show. But a lot of times those smaller cons, you didn't see, people that went on to become an image founder. You didn't see, George Perez at a local hotel, con. I mean, this is talking in like the late 90s. You didn't see them at those, you definitely saw them in like the 70s, the earlier 70s and 80s in the early convention scene. But when I grew up, I remember the fact that the reason why you didn't see those name creators was not because they didn't want to meet fans. It's not because they were shy. It's not because they didn't want to make money. They weren't at these shows because they had deadlines and they had to stay home to finish their books. And I started thinking about that. Like the fact that in a way, you can make a career of attending conventions, particularly if you can produce just new original art and prints to sell people. And that can be a good living. But I realized that in terms of actually storytelling, producing a book, that if I'm not home producing the book, there's not going to be any book for people to read. So if I want to just make art to sell conventions, there's lots of people that do it, and there's lots of people who are fans of that, fans of artists just in terms of the visual pieces they make. And they're not necessarily concerned about the writing or whether this person's going to draw a comic. And I think that's actually something I might experiment with as kind of alternate between maybe spending a year just doing prints and originals and spend a year making a graphic novel. And then 1 year I'm selling graphic novels. And then the next year, it's like I've got a ton of prints that I'm, the year that I'm pushing the graphic novel, I'm home just drawing new prints. And then the following year, when I'm selling all those new prints, I'm just at home working on comics. And these are all things that I think about in terms of ways I want to experiment with the business side and be creative about how I approach that. But again, it's very difficult to do that when you've got a very limited range of time. So
yeah.
Well, I think you're doing very well with it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's for sure.
Now you had we brought it up just a second ago, the Eye of the Gods. That was your first graphic novel. Can you tell us a little bit more about that one? Yeah,
yes.
Remember, I love this the premise for it. So
Yeah. So Eye of the Gods is a psychological thriller. It's about a man he's cursed with visions he can't control. He can look through other people's eyes and he can see what they're seeing, but he can't control it. He witnesses a murder, only to find out it's being reported in the news as a death by natural causes. So there's a conspiracy and a cover-up going on. He's got to get to the bottom of it.
Mm. So,
And again, this is one of those amazing uses of shadows.
oh
I
yeah.
love that book.
What was, like we said, this was your first graphic novel. What was your first comic that you ever created? I mean, even as a little kid, what was the first?
Well, let me see. I know that I had, I mean, there's stuff that I drew for fun as a little kid. Like I kind of did my own adaptation of the animated Transformers, the movie from the 80s, because I was a huge Transformers kid. But I think the first comic that well, there's two. One is I had mentioned being in high school and having AP Studio Arts, and I did a comic book for my portfolio, of course. So, and it was a weird thing about this clone. It was like a weird genetic experimentation. This clone was trying to stop this authoritarian government, this authoritarian empire from taking control of his planet. And he kind of like he had this mentor who was his teacher, but it was actually this guy that he refers to as his father, because it's a scientist who used his own DNA to create this guy. And it's like his brain is kind of preserved, kind of like a ghost in the machine. So the robot is like his, you know, is just the body that's conveying his essence, his mind. So that was probably one of my earliest projects. And then also I was working in high school. I started working with a small studio, a small press. And I worked on a series of sort of reinterpretation of the Faustian story, not in terms of Faust like Tim Vigil's Faust, but more sort of like the biblical thing of a man making a deal with the devil to get extreme power. So it's sort of based on Wolfgang, I believe it's Goethe, is how you say his name. It's a German name, even though it looks like Goethe from the way it's spelled. But anyway, again, I'm butchering it. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but anyway, in that story, it's a man who makes a deal with Mephistopheles to learn, you know, basically to show him all the secrets of the universe. But then at the end of the story, he has to give up his soul. And our story is about what happens after he goes to hell. So that was a story I did with a buddy of mine in high school. So a lot of hell and demons and devils come up. I don't know. I think that exploring the dark side is what keeps with my sunny disposition. Because generally, I think I'm a pretty happy person, and I like to joke around and laugh and not dwell on stuff. But I think that's because I think I think I have anxieties and fears and horrors just like everyone else in the world. But I pour all of that into my artwork, and because of that, people find me very confusing as a human being, because people who have seen my artwork first and then meet me are like, you seem so normal and
Yeah.
because the stuff I draw is just horrible and miserable. And then people who meet me first as a person and then see my art later on think I'm a serial killer because they're like, what, how are you hiding this? How is this not coming out in your personality? But I think in general, art, whether it's dark art or whether it's fan art or whether it's manga or anime or writing prose or whatever, creativity is very cathartic. And I think that's the best thing that art does for human beings is it allows us to not just express ourselves, but in a way it's kind of a spiritual or emotional cleansing. We can take all of the turmoil and all of the fear and all of the anxiety and all the things that we deal with on a day-to-day and all the things that might make us behave in a negative manner and treat people poorly or harm others. We can pour all that into creativity and hopefully use that to, one, get it out of ourselves, but two, maybe by other people experiencing that artwork, maybe it can make them, other people who don't necessarily have those channels of expression, feel like they aren't alone in the world. So it can be very healing in that way, to get all new agey and turn around from jokey darkness to getting real on you. I think that art's good for the soul.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way of putting it.
Oh yeah.
It really is. Well, you mentioned having some other projects coming along. Can we tell anybody about anything?
Well, I can't tell. The only one I'm really ready to talk about is the sequel to the graphic novel Eye of the Gods, because that one, I mean, people have been asking for a long time. So it's going to be another kind of a psychological thriller.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the direction the series is going to take is going to be sort of like Tom Clancy meets H.P. Lovecraft.
Oof.
Kind of like supernatural espionage.
That sets a pretty high bar there.
Yeah, it's a really unique
Well, like I said, I
combination
swing
too.
for the fence.
Okay. All right. So
We'll see if I can pull it off.
Yeah.
if anybody can, I know you can.
Yeah, I believe in you.
Well, I appreciate that. I do realize, yeah, there are actually a couple of other things that I have coming up that I'm probably going to do. Yeah, I'm actually probably going to do before I publish that sequel. And one of them is, for a long time I've been meaning to make a YouTube video. I've been meaning to make a book based on a YouTube video I did that was really popular. Someone asked me how I write my comics. So it's very much like, for me, I'm very big on outlining. And I made a video kind of showing my outline process and how I build a story. And that one, by and large, has been one of the most popular videos in my series. So I thought I should probably make a book about this. And I'm making it sort of I try to come at it from kind of like a humble standpoint, because I still have a tremendous amount to learn about writing. And I'm a student and I'm constantly trying to learn and grow. But I had to kind of build a process that worked for me, and that seems like that other people have responded to that. So I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, this is how I'm interpreting the process of storytelling and outlining and story structure, as somebody who is still constantly growing and learning and reinventing themselves. So one is going to be a book about outlining for comics and visual storytelling in general. So it's not going to be a long book. It's probably going to be something that's maybe like an 80-page, something between 40 and 80 pages. I have to actually lay it out and see how it looks in print format. Because I mean, the content is based on like an hour-long lecture. So there's that. Then I've been telling people for years that I was going to do a collection of figure drawings, because, like, as you mentioned on my YouTube channel, I share all my process. I started sharing both my figure drawings and me working on like redrawing them, because I think that a lot of times when you see other artists, when they do let people in on their process and let people into their studio and see what they're doing, what they're sharing is, I'm making this awesome thing. What I don't think as many creators share is all of the hard work they have to do to get good enough to make the thing they're trying to make. So for me, it's like I'm inviting people in into the gym to watch me lift weights. That's what I do with the figure drawing stuff. So people have mentioned, are you ever going to put together a collection of your figure drawings? So I said I was going to do that back in 2015, I want to say.
Oh wow.
Now we're at 2020. So I've got extra 5 years worth of drawings to throw in there. So it might be a big ass book. There's that.
Gotta remember to add those figure drawings from when you were like 5 years old or something, so you can really.
Well, you know what? I wish I had started doing figure drawing back then. Because the drawings I do have from then, definitely I'd be much farther along if I'd started earlier. But I have, besides the sequel to Eye of the Gods, I have 2 books I've been really batting around. One is a reinterpretation of a Greek myth. So again, much like with Morningstar, reinterpreting another thing, I like the idea of taking mythological stories and existing concepts and saying, how can I freak this? How can I twist it and do my own thing? And then I've got like a new story that's kind of a social commentary story. And then I had planned for Morningstar ends with issue 8. That said, there's going to be two. It's going to be a 2-volume series. So I've got the trade of the first 4 issues. I've got the trade of the second 4 issues.
Okay.
Books tend to sell best as a trilogy, but I plan to end it at those 2 books until I was in the shower the other day, and I thought, there's one more story with
Oh,
Lucifer
nice.
after he falls that would be interesting. Like I told myself I'm not going to do a 3rd book just to do it. I'm going to only do a 3rd book if I think of an idea that I think is interesting and worth doing. And just like the past 2 weeks, the idea for what that 3rd book would be occurred to me. I'm going to wrap up Morningstar, and I'm going to set it aside for a little while so I can come back to all of these other things that I told you, all these other irons in the fire. But someday there will be a 3rd Morningstar volume.
Oh,
Ooh.
nice. I've been loving this series. I love it. I love it. Just the concept and everything. So telling me that there's going to be another one, that's music to my ears.
Well, it's torture because you may not see it for a decade and you're like, where's that book?
Hey, I got your number. I'll be calling all the time going, come on, do something.
Yeah, we're pretty good at camping out next to your booth already.
Yeah, see,
We don't have a problem waiting.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll make a deal with you. Not when we're done recording, I'll tell you what the premise is for the 3rd book, because I don't want to put it out there and tell people, because once I do tell them, people really aren't going to. People are like, you just don't do any other projects. Just do that 3rd book. But so I'll tell you guys, but I'm not ready to share it with the world yet. It's too much pressure. I'll crumble under the pressure.
I don't know if I can handle that kind of pressure.
And you're going to wait till the interview's over, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. It's been fun.
Interview's done. See you guys.
So what kind of stuff do you like to do outside of just drawing? You said that you're married, you have a wife. What kind of stuff do you like to do?
Well, let's see. Well, really, my wife and I, we both we're both pretty busy, so a lot of times it's just relaxing and downtime together. We don't travel as much as we used to. We wanted to like go on trips like once a year. We went to Florence, Italy a couple of years ago. Well, a few years ago, travel in general, most people they like to travel. We wanted to try and get out of the country once a year. We haven't always been able to do that, but we went on a tour of Italy one year. We went to Rome, Venice, Florence, and Sorrento. And the one place we felt like we didn't get enough time was Florence. So a couple years ago, we took another trip and we just rented an Airbnb. We didn't go on a tour or anything. We just rented an Airbnb, went to Florence, stayed there for like 10 days, went to museums and just walked around, ate great food and shopped and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, that sounds.
So, yeah. And I think the nice thing is traveling, trying to find places that have things that are going to be interesting for both of us. Because my wife is very into art and she's supportive of me as an artist, but she's not an artist herself. So I don't necessarily want to bore her by dragging her all around the different historical sites that I would probably want to go to. So we find a nice compromise of things that we both appreciate. Besides travel, I am not as fit as I would like to be, but I'm a big believer in exercise as a creative person, because all of us that make stuff have to sit in one spot to make it. Being a creative is a sedentary lifestyle. I mean, a lot of people in business, they're in cubicles all day, and they're in front of a computer. It's sedentary, but particularly for artists and writers, you start developing back problems, you start developing repetitive stress syndrome, different injuries in your wrist, that kind of thing. So I usually once a day in the morning when I wake up, I either go cycling or I do yoga in the morning just for general fitness. And then during my work day, I intentionally, like a couple of times a day, I just get up from my computer, walk outside of the office, the work building, and then just walk around the building once just to get my body moving so I'm not stationary all day. If I can find time in the afternoons, I may take a short walk in a park that's like next to our offices. But yeah, just not sitting in one place, physical activity just for the sake of maintaining your health. Because I want to be able to make art for a long time. And if we don't take care of our bodies, we're not going to be able to. And I think that a lot of times, I think most of us are so busy and stressed out with everything in our lives, we don't think about that simple fact of needing to take care of our bodies just so we can keep making stuff.
Right.
So I'm a big proponent of that. And then beyond that, honestly, I think that I'm really crappy at having interests outside of art. I think that having other interests makes you a more well-rounded human being. More often than not, if I'm not drawing, then I'm reading books about art or reading about art history. What I try to do is I try to have a rotating stack of books. So what I'll do is I'll read a nonfiction book. When I'm done with that, I'll read a graphic novel. When I'm done with that, I will read a prose fiction novel. Then when I'm done with that, I'll read a book that is an educational book, usually art education. But sometimes I'll make the nonfiction book maybe an educational one. But the point is that I love reading, but I'm trying to intentionally vary up the cycle of what I'm reading. So I've always got new stuff going into my brain, because a lot of that, sometimes just reading a book. Oh, you know what? This is a great writing tip for people, like whenever you get writing block. I found that the same way that a lot of times for artists, when we need inspiration to get our brains going again, we'll go pull down a book, like a sketchbook from an artist that we like, or something else. We'll just flip through some great art books, and they'll be like, oh wait, there should be something like this. Maybe I can use this color palette. Things will inspire you. The other day, I was reading a biography of Roald Dahl, the guy who wrote James and the Giant Peach, and all those other great kids books.
He was a weird guy, actually. Pretty cool story.
Yeah. And I didn't know that he used to work. That he was a British fighter pilot and used to work in the embassy and was kind of a quasi spy and kind of like traveled in the circles of like Ian Fleming. I mean, he probably was a full-on spy, and they just weren't able to put a lot of that in the books. But that's pretty interesting. But also, apparently, he was not the nicest human being to some people, and had certain beliefs that I kind of find revolting. But point being is that I was reading the book, and at certain points in it, I was just it shook loose things in my brain about a different story I was writing. And it wasn't like, oh, I saw him do something interesting in this biography, or something in his life solved the problem. It was literally reading something and kind of distracting me from what I was working on in my head enough for it to sort of break loose. And I had to put the book down and go write for a little bit. So reading, they say that you need to, if you want to be a writer, you have to write and you have to read a lot. But the reading isn't, in my opinion, it isn't just to study sentence structure and story structure and study the craft. Sometimes reading simply helps jar loose something that you're struggling with. Or, you ever, like, you're reading a book and you expect something to happen and you turn the page and something different than that happened. And it's not worse, but you're like, I wonder what would have happened if they had done the thing I was imagining. That alone may start you down the direction of developing a whole separate story that's based on someone going zigging instead of zagging.
Yeah.
And it ends up being something that's completely different, even though its origins might be in a book that everybody knows. And people wouldn't be like, I would never have thought of this based on that book.
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's...
Well, we're hitting up... Actually, we've kind of gone over our scheduled time. Sorry, Jeremy.
Oh,
You're
no,
interesting.
I'm the long-winded one. I apologize. You get me talking about creativity, I won't shut up.
Let's make sure everybody knows how to find you and where to find you. We've got the profile page on Crypto Comics right now showing on the screen.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt, for that. Perfect timing. We've also got Jeremy's own site here. We'll put the link in the description and anywhere that we put it, but I believe it was Jeremy.store. was it?
Well, the if you go to jeremy.net, it forwards you to my my store page. So jeremy.net is perfect. And the nice thing there is there's links on the left-hand side of the page. So it'll link you to my Amazon author page. It'll link you to my newsletter. It'll link you to my YouTube channel, my Instagram, my Patreon. You can get to all of those things there. So
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
and there,
Make sure everybody goes and supports him.
yeah,
You're gonna love him just as much as I do.
now I'm already subscribed to your YouTube channel, but so, but oh, I love watching your videos. They're really cool. So
well, thank you. I appreciate it. I try to just make it sort of like, honestly, I try to make it like the conversations that you and I are having right now. But it's just while it's while I'm drawing. So I'm glad. I appreciate that you've been watching. I appreciate you guys sharing it and taking the time to have this interesting conversation. It's always good to talk to you guys.
No, it's always good to hang out with you, man.
oh yeah.
Always. I just got to make sure I get to WonderCon because I thought for sure you were going to Amazing, which means I got to do another convention.
Oh, like you're complaining. You know you love it.
Oh yeah.
I'll be back to Amazing eventually. I love that show. Jimmy always puts on a great convention, so I definitely don't want to abandon that. It's just right now I gotta hunker down and make stuff. I mean, I already told you all the stuff that I'm planning to make.
Yeah,
And
you don't have much time.
You say sit your ass down and stay home, make stuff.
Yeah, I'd rather read your new books than see you at another convention. I'm going to be honest with you. Not that I don't, want to see you all the time, but hurry up and make more books.
All right, I'm gonna get cracking.
Yeah.